Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for turning out to the first in a new series called We Need to Talk here at ACCA. As always, I want to acknowledge where we are, which is on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and pay my respects on behalf of everyone here to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to the people of the Kulin Nations, particularly as well to elders Carolyn Briggs of the Bunwurrung and Auntie Joy Murphy-Wandin of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I am so lucky to be joined today by the one and only Tschabalala self. So if you don't know Tschabalala, maybe you've been living under a rock, because she is a force in contemporary art. And this exhibition has been an absolute joy to put together with the wonderful co-curator, our senior curator and head of exhibitions, Dr. Shelley McSpadden. None of this happens without you, Shelley. This show is very, very much a joint effort from everyone. So thank you, Shelley. So I want to start by asking you a question. And I'm going to preface this with saying that Shaba and I have been working on this show together for about 10 months. Yeah. With all of the time that we've been working together, we've been talking together, writing together. Can you tell me who the characters are in your universe that you're creating?
Well, the people that you see in the paintings, they're combinations, they're amalgamations of several different beings. I mean, I think that they all reflect aspects of myself, but they also reflect loved ones, people that I have met in passing, characters from other novels and films, pop cultural figures, ideas, aspirations, fears, desires. So they're really a combination of several different things. And the figures, I would say that they're characters because they're playing a part almost, and they're symbolic of kind of greater overarching ideas or tropes, or experiences like that everyone kind of encounters at some point in their life. So that's kind of how I think about them.
Tell me about your journey to becoming the artist you are today.
Well, even as a child, I made lots of art. And for me, making art as a child was a way for me to kind of entertain myself or to play. But I guess looking back on it, it was actually, I used it in a similar way that I do today, which is really to just decompress and to kind of make sense of the world around me. So a lot of the subjects of my early artworks were my family members. Like I come from a very large family, so my siblings.
How many siblings?
It's 5 of us all together.
So I get the sense from talking to you that you spent a lot of your childhood watching.
I spent a lot of time watching. I did. And in some ways, though, I got a lot of attention because my older siblings were adults. So they were kind of like demi parents. And the siblings that were closest in age to me were quite entertaining to watch. They were teenagers and had lots of friends. They were just really, I spent a lot of my life looking at people and kind of being a quiet observer, especially my early childhood. And I didn't really have any peers in my household. So I didn't have like playmates or anything. That's also why art became a really convenient outlet. So yeah, I think that I have spent a lot of time like looking at people, understanding kind of interpersonal dynamics, being fascinated by them. And I think that's carried on into my adult life and my interest in figuration, narrative, storytelling. So.
Tell me about your parents, because they're obviously huge motivators in your practice. I think it was your father who had said to you, civil liberties can and will be taken away, but no one can take away your mind. So educate yourself and always be searching, always be growing, always be expanding, because that is yours and no one can touch it. When I look at your work, I feel like you are so profoundly generous because you take that deeply personal kind of autoethnographic approach to work, making sense of the world through yourself and through your own experiences. But obviously your parents were profoundly influential in every aspect of your work. So tell me about them.
Well, my father, he was a writer in his youth, and that's actually one of the reasons that my parents moved from New Orleans to New York City because my father was pursuing his MFA at Columbia. And both my parents, once they settled in New York, they worked in education. They loved literature, they loved politics. They were very proud of themselves, of their identity, of their community, and they really instilled that in all of their children. And I feel like, my parents also really loved art, they loved culture, they felt like culture was the peak manifestation of, like, intellect and of cultural pride. So I think that's also why, I was encouraged to, like, pursue, like, the creative field. And I'm really thankful for that because it's like, as you said, I don't really know what else I would have done and could have had felt as fulfilled in doing. And I feel like this is my way of, contributing to, I guess, contributing back to the world. I feel like I can be generous in this way in a way that and for it to be meaningful, like through my practice and through sharing my ideas in this way and sharing my opinions in this way. And it's really amazing because I think through my art, I've been able to speak about things that are of deep concern to me, but also and even bring these concerns to a global stage, which I don't know if I would have been able to do that with a different medium.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I'm really thankful for to have found this and to have been encouraged to pursue it and to have been able to find success.
Your work is an amalgamation. It's bringing together disparate things to create something new. How do you explain it?
Well, I've always wanted the ways in which the paintings are constructed to reflect the thought process behind the work. Um, I wanted someone to encounter one of my pieces and to be able to have like um, a visceral and an intuitive understanding of what my intentions were without me being there to advocate, without there being a didactic even, because that's sometimes that's how work is experienced in the world. So the figures themselves being made of various pieces of fragments, at different kind of elements, some that are connected, some that are disparate, is really meant to mimic a human experience, like a person, how personhood is developed. There are aspects of yourself that are inherent. There are aspects to yourself that are acquired, some that are projected. But regardless, you end up being a collection of all of these aspects, and together that creates who you are. So the figures, through their construction, is really meant to mimic this experience that happens for all of us, actually.
Mm. How do you see that relationship between the history, the physical histories of the fabrics and the materials, and then the imagination?
Well, I, I mean, a lot of my ideas about all of these things are kind of constantly shifting. I mean, even during this exhibition, the opening night or the day before the opening, I kind of had a realization about this new body of work in particular is quite spiritual and it speaks a lot about duality. I think that the idea of real and unreal is another duality that I think exists within my practice, but also just in general in terms of some of my beliefs in regard to spirituality. And the fact that there's a play in the show as well, I realized that that's becomes particularly significant in this exhibition because they're all on a stage, and the stage is real in the universe of the actors, but it's not real in the greater context of the project because there's an audience and the stage is an artifice. So I kind of feel that way too in regard to like what's real, what's not real. I do feel like, this existence is real, but there's possibly an ultimate realer reality as well. So, I try to bring that bit of ambiguity into the work. So the figures, their world is real, but it's all a construction, I think similar to ours. And their bodies are real, but they're also constructions and they're made to look quite literally like constructions to be quite evident that they're fashioned as a way to make the viewer themselves more aware of the existential concerns in their own life, for them to question things that are of true value, that are truly real, and are true, or and things that are just illusions of reality. So that's kind of like some of the things, some of the thought process behind the process, and how the work and my intentions with them and how they're presented in the works.
Feel free to tell me to mind my own business, but do you believe in a higher power?
Well, yeah, I do. I believe in the higher power and a higher intelligence. I think that's pretty evident from like my how I speak about my work, and just also how the work like appears. I think that I this is why I also think that the body is interesting, because I don't think that the body is just functioning in regard to like an identity politic. I think that the body is truly like a vessel that you use to like navigate the world, and that's why it's important. That's why it's important to speak about. That's why it's important to pay homage to. And that's why it's important, I think, to pay attention to the specificity of that vessel for each individual, and the specificity of a lived experience that follows that vessel, because it shapes the experience ultimately of something that's outside of that vessel. So that's why it's important to have these conversations.
We were chatting and you said when you're in art school, there's sort of a tendency to see beauty as decorative or not serious. That beautiful art is not given, like in art school you're kind of encouraged to make work that's ugly because that's conceptual and that's important. And you framed it in this way where you said to make something beautiful is an incredibly difficult thing. Not only in your work, but in every aspect of your life. I see that beauty as a kind of form of resistance. Because I mean, I see in your earliest work, I think the collages you made as like a 4-year-old are beautiful. So you obviously have an eye and it's intuitive in some regard, but it's also a politic and it's a choice to decide to resist anything in this world that might try and change what your values are. And beauty is one of them. Talk about why beauty matters.
Well, I came to the realization that that beauty itself is tethered to a higher form of intelligence when I personally started living in a more like rural environment. So I moved to upstate New York in 2023, and just being in that environment and just being closer to nature, um, I just started to realize is how beautiful the natural world is, and understanding that the natural world is not man-made, obviously, but that that's something that's I find aspirational, to create something that is so effortless and so poignant and so sublime as the things I see around me and my current home and current landscape that I'm living in. So that was kind of the first awakening for me, and for in terms of having an appreciation for beauty, and it came really from my experience with the natural world, and that's something that I have like since then coveted for my practice, for my own aesthetic, for my own ability. And I realized that I just thought I realized I had never aspired toward this. I thought of it as being even being valuable because of some of the socialization I had had from our arts education. And also from just growing up in a city. You grow up in a city, you start to associate awe with the things that are around you, which are man-made. So you start to think that wealth is beautiful, grandeur is beautiful, things that human beings control and construct are beautiful, because there's no other reference point. You can't even see the stars in the sky in a city at night, you know? So you don't really see anything much beyond the constructed world. So it's really leaving that environment, being more in nature, that allowed me to see that there are things that are far beyond what I can produce alone, that any other person like me can produce, that are infinitely intelligent and infinitely complex. And that then became my new goalpost. The goalpost kind of shifted in terms of like what I wanted to strive for in my own practice.
Your work taught me something. You said it the other day around how there's no violence in the breaking of these bodies. Can you just speak to this idea?
Yeah, a lot of times people, I think, have, because of the visual culture, that does show so much violence inflicted onto Black and brown bodies. I think that when people see the work and they see what they perceive to be a fracturing or a fragmentation, they automatically assume that it speaks to that reality, to that history, to that also history of visual culture, but that I want to just really be quite clear and moving forward to explain to people that the figures are contorting in terms towards their expansion, not towards their disintegration,
Mm.
if that makes any sense.
When you brought this idea to me, I felt like a cold glass of water just hit me in the face because I just hadn't. I'm quite ashamed to say I had never noticed that the only bodies I see in the media, it's only ever black and brown bodies that have this violence that we see enacted. And I see in your work these wonderful kind of tensions, productive spaces that exist within tensions where opposing forces come together. And the black and white stripe, the harlequin, the checkerboard patterning, Adam and Eve, it's the sun and the moon, it's yin and yang, it's male and female, it's the before times and it's the after times. It's always this kind of coming together of two forces.
Yes.
How do you see this duality manifest in your work? And what is your reflection on that kind of nuance?
Well, I think I explore several different kinds of opposites. I don't want to say opposing forces because I think that they come together to create a whole that is actually quite harmonious. I think one I can say would be like joy and pain. Is maybe one I would say I identify with or resonates the most in regard to my practice or this current body of work. But I imagine that these two opposites, without them, you don't have the totality of a lived experience, of a human experience of life. So basically, they're complements to one another, and you can't fully understand one without having experienced the other. And I feel that way about pretty much most things in life, and I particularly feel that way about the Black experience, especially within an American context. That's why I think as well it's been hard for me sometimes to fit my work like more neatly into some of the larger conversations in regard to Black American identity politic because I feel like everything that happens or has happened to Black America has created for all of the beauty that exists there. So I'm in some ways I don't have any kind of inks around my own personal narrative, my historical narrative, my ancestral narrative. I'm thankful for all of it. And that's something I think is hard for people to to fully understand conceptually in regard to my work oftentimes.
I want to ask you about a few works in particular. So we're sitting in front of this divine diptych. I chose to sit in front of Eve because I thought I would like shake it up. I thought it'd be better if I was on this side. But Adam and Eve and the parable, the biblical story, at its core, Eve is expelled from the Garden of Eden for wanting knowledge and safety,
Mhm.
as if these two things you are not allowed to have it at the same time. When you think about it, Eve had every right to want to know what was beyond Eden and to know the truth and to seek knowledge and to also know comfort. Why Adam and Eve? They feature a lot throughout the show. We've got the magnificent mural of the snake. We've got the portraits here. Why this story?
Well, I've always been intrigued with origin stories in general, and I feel like this is a origin story of humanity. And I don't know, it just occurred to me. I can't say there was like one particularly fully fleshed out reason why I felt inspired to make the portrait, I mean the painting of Adam and Eve, but I did feel inspired to explore this biblical narrative. And I think also one of the reasons was I was particularly interested in the environment that they would have existed in this Eden.
Mm.
I made this work, in Hudson Valley during the summer, And I think also too, just being in that landscape to me is just so healing and
It's
so
as close to
beautiful.
Eden as I've ever.
I mean, I honestly feel like it's such a beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful landscape that I also, even with friends, I joke and say that it's like looks like Eden there. It's so perfect in so many ways. So I think that I was because of also my own what's going on in my own life, my marriage, like so many things. I felt like I wanted to revisit this narrative and kind of unpack it and find a way for it to be personally meaningful for me and in a way that truly resonated and made sense. And what I've come to, and it didn't I didn't come to this resolution or this realization once I finished. It was really coming here and kind of installing the work and seeing it again. But what the story means for me is that I think that, you know, E- Eve wanted to eat the apple, like you said, to gain this knowledge that she was told would come to her as a result of consuming it from the snake. And that decision or it could be seen as a transgression because it was something she was asked or told not to do. It created chaos, and the chaos created, I guess, what we know to be the current human state, a state of ambiguity, of sin, of things that are dark feelings, darkness, unhappiness, things that are not outside of the realm of perfection because they were living within a realm of perfection prior to that. Um, but that chaos created a choice, so that it was a choice that out of that chaos, she would be able, or he would be able, all of us would be able to gain peace again, but it would have to be something that you choose, not something that is just given to you. And I feel like to choose peace, to choose salvation at some point after having loss of favor is actually more powerful. I think it's just a greater narrative. It's a metaphor for just life in general. To basically not to fear bad times and not to fear chaotic moments in your life because it gives you then an opportunity to make a choice as to whether or not you want to stay in that state or if you want to seek peace. So that's really the meaning for of this work to me, and it's the meaning of that biblical narrative for me too personally.
And I think, I mean, I read from your work also a kind of fierce intellectual activism around the right that you have for both peace and knowledge. And there's another new work produced for this show in the first gallery on the left as you come in. It's a part of a paired work that's separate works, but it's submission and humility. When we were having a yarn early on, you said something, and I'm badly paraphrase it, around you could spend your whole life fighting for your right to exist. And that's something that I think Aboriginal communities, Black communities, any marginalized communities around the world, we get it. And it's like turning a ship. You do all of this work and then it turns like this much. And you could spend your whole life fighting, or you could submit and live your life. And both are correct. But often in moments of crises, people turn, in particular, I would say to the Black community, to take leadership and to turn up and to be kind of activists. But it's your right to fight, and it's also your right to just live your life. You changed my life because I had not thought of submission in this way. I had not thought of it as something that is an act of power. I thought of it as an act of being disempowered. Talk to us about producing that work. Talk to us about how you see this.
Well, the idea is very nuanced. So it again goes back to my belief in a reality that we all inhabit and then an ultimate reality. So in regard to what you just brought up, the fight, let's say you're fighting for your political rights as a marginalized person. Part of doing that is to concede to the idea of who you are based on the narrative that an oppressive force has named you, has named for you. So, I guess my point is that I could spend. I'll use my own personal self because I feel like it's the most appropriate. But I could spend my life advocating, trying to explain to people who are sexist or who are racist that I'm valuable because I'm a woman, or I'm still valuable despite being a woman or despite being black. Or I could stop engaging with the narrative that they have projected onto me and just know that I'm valuable, and know who I am, because I'm not, my existence is not dictated by this other person, this other human being. I'm a child of the universe. I'm a child of God. So I can be secure in that, and I can know that I do not need to fight these other people. I'm can live my life, and I can have a human experience regardless of these systems that are being projected or placed upon me. So that's kind of the idea behind submission. It's not about submitting to a state. It's not about submitting to a political force. It's not about submitting to another human being. It's about submitting to the reality of you being a soul having a human experience, submitting to that ultimate reality and getting comfort in that, and allowing that submission to give you faith and enough strength to survive any earthly issue or any earthly trial that you experience, because you are aware of your ultimate identity. So that's kind of what that work is about. I think that's an important lesson for people to hold on to. Not to say that people can are not meant to fight for political issues, because politics are extremely important, and people are harmed and killed or disenfranchised perpetually because of how they're perceived by the state, by other people. So you have to advocate for yourself in that regard too. But you can't lose sight of who you are and the ultimate reality, I think. I think once you do, you kind of lose the plot, and you can't even effectively fight for your political concerns without understanding that you cannot fully identify with narratives that are most of the time completely false, that have been created in regard to your identity politics. So that's kind of what that work is about.
Right now, we are in a time of global conflict, and you have found this. Is it peace? Is it submission? Is it acceptance? Is it enlightenment? I don't know if there even is a word. You found it and articulated it out of what I see as a crisis of our people, of the human race. Is it related to what's happening in the world, or is this a personal journey? How do you describe it?
Well, I wouldn't say also too that it's necessarily like an acceptance of how things are now, because the terms of I don't think any of the political terms that currently you can accept, because they are inhumane and immoral and ultimately irrational. So they're not terms that are acceptable. But I guess I I don't know, honestly. I don't think it's just because of this current political moment that I've tried to develop this personal practice. I would say it's something that I've been developing throughout my life as a means to maintain my own sanity and my own dignity, I would say. But I've just I just don't know if the general narrative around, the expectations for Black and brown communities, if I've ever truly identified with them and it felt like they've truly benefited, um, communities of color. I just don't know if that's the reason why I've sought, alternative ways to deal with, me being made to feel marginalized. And even something like that, like, I would never describe myself as a marginalized person, but I acknowledge that I am perpetually made to feel marginalized, but I don't think of myself as less than anyone else.
There was something we talked about at dinner the other night that is very relevant to this, and I want it to be the last point, which is when you hear American, maybe you just think white, cis, het man. But Black Americans have been in America for as long as any people other than Native Americans. Yet it's still this kind of othering of what it means to be a Black American to be a Black American is to be part of the Atlantic slave trade and to have come, but have been in America as long as anyone other than Native Americans. Yet there's still this kind of othering. What is your take on this? Having spent 2 weeks in Australia, having experienced the totally different, I don't know, culture, people. What's your take on this?
Well, it's just been very interesting to come here and to have to meet people, other Black people here. Obviously, it's a very different experience, but it's so analogous in many ways. Um, it has been very validating, honestly, to kind of meet other. For me, it's always validating to go to other nations and meet other communities of color and to see the similarities between our histories and our contemporary day to day life. And I think I'm still unpacking a lot of the experiences that I've had here, and I would have to give them more thought once I get back home. But one thing that I am thankful for the opportunity to have is to go to another country and to explain to people that, there is a specificity to the Black American identity, and it is very much tethered to the history of the transatlantic slave trade. And that a lot of times when I tell people that I'm Black American, they ask me, well, where is my family from? And that comment can be a little bit triggering for me because
No one
um,
would ask that to someone who says I'm American, would they?
I don't believe so,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, and then also too, it's more of a triggering comment, not out of ego or out of, or pride. It's really because my family has been as a descendant of American slavery, there's no one nation that I can say where my family is from other than America. And I just hope that people can become more aware of that in the future. And I think that it can be a misunderstanding of the history of the country, a estimation of the centuries long institution of chattel slavery in America, and what does that mean for the descendants of those individuals and to their stake in an American identity?
You are extremely generous, erudite, and unbelievably talented. Thank you for everything you have given us in this show, this gift to the people of Melbourne, of Nam. This is a show that will be remembered for many years. I know that. I can feel it in my spirit. I want to leave you with one last question, and it is if when people come into this show, if they take one thing away with them, what would you hope that is?
Well, I would love for people to come to this show and to learn something about me, but to ultimately learn something about themselves. So I want them to be able to be in front of one of these works and have a true transformation, have a true revelation about what it means to be human.
Well, I can tell you at least one person has, so mission accomplished. But I know on behalf of all of us here today, thank you for this body of work, for your unwavering commitment to generosity, to beauty, and we will continue to watch you thrive. Thank you for everything. If you'd please all join me in thanking the wonderful Tschabalala self.
Thank you. Thank you all.